Hey there, folks, and welcome to the Whitfield Report Thursday edition. I am your host, Sam Whitfield, recording live from NGC Studios here in South Florida, and I want to thank you so very much for joining us here today in the past, present, future hour, whenever you may be hearing this. And most likely, you're actually listening to this on Friday. So, what am I saying? It's not live at all, but I'm still recording it. At any rate, thank you for joining me, and thank you for tuning into the podcast and continuing just to support the show in general. I really appreciate it, as always. Let's get to social media real quick. As always, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @SamDeeper_NGC, Gab and Minds at Sam Whitfield, Facebook.com/Whitfield Report, YouTube.com/The Whitfield Report, which is where you can find the live streaming broadcasts that are on Saturday night. Obviously, the Thursday show is more or less an audio exclusive. So, welcome to the audio podcast feed. And if you are so inclined, please leave the podcast, the Whitfield Report audio podcast, a 5-star rating. They're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. And I really appreciate that as well. And just thanks for being an awesome, listener. Thank you for being a part of Sam's Savages and whatnot. So anyway, I guess a lot of you guys are expecting me to talk about the Democrat debates, right? Well, wrong. We're not going to talk about the Dem debates for this podcast, not on the Thursday podcast at least. And I've explained in the past that I really don't have any interest in watching the Dem debates at this point, just because there are still so many of the Dems in the field that, like, it's impossible to tell, who's going to come out on top. I mean, they're all so far to the left, and I mean, I know that Tulsi is kind of the only reasonable one here at this point, but even she, seems pretty far to the left on a lot of, things in terms of social policy and economic policy. She's just more rational than the rest of the Dems in the field, which I will give her credit for. But, and she wasn't even in this debate tonight from what I've heard. So, it's not really, it wasn't worth watching. I'll watch the highlights, as I compile and get ready for Saturday's show, but really at this point, there's nothing for me to talk about, folks. But what I do want to talk with you about for this podcast, folks, for the Thursday podcast, which granted, like I said, you'll probably be hearing this on Friday when all is said and done. But nonetheless, I want to review Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr's Netflix specials. It'll be non-spoiler, so don't worry for those of you who haven't seen them yet. Although at this point, Chappelle's has been out for 2 or 3 weeks now, and Burr's has been out since Tuesday. So, I'll give people leniency on the Bill Burr one a little bit, since it's still, it came out on Tuesday and people were working during the week, or, they had school or whatever. So if you haven't seen the Bill Burr, I'll give you guys a little more leniency on that. But by now, everyone should have seen Dave Chappelle's new Netflix special. So we'll be talking about the two specials and kind of the state of stand-up comedy in general. And then I kind of want to address some changes I've made in terms of the podcast just in general. They're not really changes that I've made, but it's more of like something that people have, asked me online and on social media that I want to address. And it will actually tie in to the comedy thing a bit. But let me just start off by saying this. So the politics and the comedy and the show, it'll all tie together tonight, folks. Mark my words on that. But anyway, first off, I have to admit that I was never like a big Dave Chappelle fan prior to, I think it was either last year or the year before when he released those two other specials on Netflix. And granted, that was mostly because in all reality, like I hadn't, heard much of Chappelle's stuff when I was growing up. I knew of the existence of obviously the Chappelle show on Comedy Central, but like I had never watched it, and none of my friends, were really like big Chappelle show watchers, so it just never came up. But around 2 years ago, when Dave did his two specials on Netflix, I watched him because I had heard his name, and I have to say that I'm a fan now of his comedy just in general. He's arguably one of the best in the business, if not the best, out there in comedy right now. I think that's, pretty clear at this point, and it's hard to deny. I mean, even Norm Macdonald tweeted out recently that, Chappelle is objectively one of the best in the business, and that, new and upcoming comics should really study him. And as a non-comedian / comedy enthusiast, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. Especially the new special he just came out with, Sticks and Stones. That is a must-see special in 2019, and going forward, that's a special that every aspiring comic / comedy enthusiast will need to see. The backlash against Dave Chappelle's special from the media, and this is especially what I want to address here. Folks, for any of you who are still wondering, you might be on the left or, like a moderate left Democrat. If you're still wondering in 2019 how anyone could have voted for, Donald Trump, just look at the Rotten Tomatoes reviews for Dave Chappelle's special And I mean, don't just look at the tomato meter, but look at like a few of the actual reviews that were written, from these quote unquote entertainment blogs. And then look at the audience, score on Netflix. The first week that Chappelle's special was out, his special had a literal 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. His, according to the critics, his special did worse among critics than fucking Batman and Robin, which is one of the worst, superhero movies / movies, period, ever to be made. But the movie reviewing establishment somehow labeled, Dave Chappelle's special worse than, fucking Batman and Robin. The audience score, however, was like a 99. And it was like really telling what the, quote unquote professional movie critics, like for Vice and for, Salon and for Vulture and for all these, like entertainment and popular culture publications were saying about Chappelle's. It's making fun of, child molestation. It's making fun of it's making fun of transgender people. Dave Chappelle is basically like a conservative, and he's black. He's advocating for like white supremacy, and Chappelle at the beginning of the special. So I guess we are venturing into spoiler territory. Chappelle at the beginning of the special does a bit where he basically does an impression, and he says, I'm going to do an impression, and I want you guys to see if you can guess who it is. He does the impression, and he does the, if any of you do anything that I don't like, I'm going to ruin you, and I'm going to dig into your past and, find stuff, and I'm going to ruin you. And he asks, now, who am I doing? And the audience all goes, like the fucking sheep that they are, it's Trump! It's Trump! And Chappelle goes, wrong! It's you! It's audiences in 2019. And, they all kind of like nervously laugh, but yeah, that was one of the other things that like a lot of these critics, I got annoyed by in the reviews. And I don't think Chappelle was so much calling out like actual comedy audiences as he was specifically like, giving the middle finger to all of these comedy reviewers who are going after comedians, like Chappelle and like Louis C.K., and probably, the reviews for Bill Burr's special haven't been like as negative from the press. I think that's partially because they know now, like, that there's going to be like a huge backlash from, the public, towards the media now, which is good. Bottom line with Chappelle's special is Dave Chappelle is the hero that we don't deserve, but that we need in 2019 for the culture war. And he's not even a conservative, but I want to, I want to get beyond that too, because like that's my other point here. You don't even have to be a conservative anymore, or, even necessarily like all that political, to recognize that, hey, this, politically correct, stuff is going way too fucking far. Even comedians, who are like liberal, like Chappelle, like Louis C.K., like Bill Burr, who, as far as I know, Bill Burr is, I know that he's a liberal on some stuff and, he's more conservative. I mean, basically, Bill Burr is an independent. I'll get to, Bill here in a sec. But the reaction from the media to Dave Chappelle's comedy special, the reaction from the press and from the SJWs out there is basically, proof and reaffirming why so many people voted for Trump, including myself. It wasn't so much that we thought that Trump was the most qualified guy in the world. Politically, he might not have been. But as I've said before, and I'll say again, Trump's election was basically like a middle finger to the, to the politically correct, BS that was infecting our country and, all throughout Obama's presidency, basically. Obama promised to unify the country. We were all told that things would get better culturally, and that Obama would be the great savior of American society. And I'm not saying that it's all Obama's fault. I mean, I don't think he was that good of a president. Most of you guys know my, opinion on Obama's presidency, but ultimately, I think that the culture war and whatnot, it got way worse. The left, started pushing for way more stuff. Like, okay, we gave you guys gay marriage, and I was apolitical on that. I was kind of good, get the government out of that. I don't care. But then it became this whole thing, where then they wanted, transgender bathrooms, and, then Bruce Jenner became Caitlyn Jenner, and we were all supposed to immediately accept her, and, people who were even accidentally still calling her Bruce were getting, crucified, and then we couldn't call illegal immigrants. We had to call them, undocumented citizens, and, and then, there were somewhere along the line, Facebook added 50,000 fucking, gender identities, and schools, started teaching what all of these 50,000 gender identities were, and it just became a nut house. And America said, enough is enough. Trump came out and said, I don't have time for this politically correct bullshit. And America, even the people who weren't fully for Trump in the beginning, like myself, I was more of a kind of a mainstream, I guess neocon at that point. And I mean, that's the other thing, the conservatives weren't really the Republican Party, the mainstream Republican Party wasn't doing anything. They were just interested in their foreign wars and their, and their, big corporate sponsors and whatnot. So they didn't care. Trump pissed off both establishment parties. So, a bunch of people, including myself, just went, fuck it, we're gonna give Trump the, the pop culture icon, a chance. If the left wants to make Obama into a culture icon, well then fuck it. We'll actually elect a real pop culture icon, and that's what we did. And, the left, they couldn't believe it. Trump, by my estimation, has actually done a pretty damn good job, so to speak. And I would also like to point out that, like, a lot of people, including some members of this listening audience, were, worried that, like, because he had John Bolton in, that we were going to go to war with Iran, and, that, like, this country was going to become, like, a big war hawk thing again. Well, Bolton's gone. So, Trump is still good in my book. But let me just tell you, like, I've had, like, worries that Trump was going to, win again in 2020. But let me just tell you, like, the overreaction from the left over even, comedians now, like Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr and Louis C.K. in that leaked set, like, making fun of their, ridiculousness and the fact that they can't handle it, it's going to get Trump reelected. Like, what they don't understand is because they're not acting rationally, like, people are just going to continue pushing back against that, whole thing. And I'm really curious to know now, too. Like, I've done a couple of appearances now. I was on Robbie Robertson's Out of the Blank podcast, and shout out to Robbie if you're listening to this. Robbie's a great interviewer. He is. And, like a lot of my podcasts, he doesn't really interview people. He just has a conversation. I love that about Robbie. And, I've done the same thing for years on my podcast with my guests as well, where I just converse with them. And I hope that Robbie's received, good feedback from other people on my podcast. I certainly think he did a good job on my podcast, and I've listened to a few of the other podcasts that he's done, since he's had me, and they're all great, and I don't, like, they're not all political, and granted, like, some of the guests might be into different things than I am, but they're great, and he's great. I hope Robbie hasn't received too, much backlash from interviewing me, but even if he does, well, Robbie, I apologize, but, if you do ever get backlash, well then, I guess just, take what you know about me and, judge for yourself. I mean, you guys talked to the real me for an hour and a half, so, and, I'm not that bad of a guy. I'm not a bad guy at all. I'm a nice guy, I think. Like, basically, I'm just, like, I wouldn't even say I'm a libertarian. I certainly am, like, I am a conservatarian. And I know I've done a whole episode on, conservatarianism. That's how I still identify. Like, I'm a guy who's a conservative on, like, lots of issues, like, in my own life when it comes to, gay marriage and, like, marijuana legalization. Like, I'm, if you're gay and you want to get married, that's fine by me. If you want to smoke pot, like, that's fine by me. Just don't, like, try and, force it on anyone else, and, don't think that people who have, like, more objections, like, they're not horrible either. That's just not their thing. And, like, I think that is the one thing where, like, stand-up comedians, and this is particularly the case with, like, Dave Chappelle, he was making fun of, how, like, there was how now the drug war and the drug epidemic has switched to, like, to white people, with, like, opiates. And he was making fun of that a little bit. And, how, like, oh, white people didn't care about the drug war, back in the 80s when it was happening to black people, but now it's opiates. Now it's a drug crisis. Like, obviously he wasn't making fun of, like, actual, drug addicts, but he was, poking fun at, like, the drug war. And, like, same thing with, like, the Michael Jackson. Like, he wasn't seriously advocating for, like, child pedophilia. He was just, making fun of and, making commentary on how, Michael Jackson's not around anymore, and, now everyone is still, like, going on at what he may or may not have done. So, comedy is going to be what saves America in the long run. It's not going to be politicians or political commentators that save us from the clown world. It's going to be stand-up comedians. It's going to be laughter. That ironically restores sanity to all of this. And, I've thought about, I've considered doing stand-up, or I guess sit-down comedy a few times. I'm good at appreciating jokes. I'm good at doing, like, comedy podcasts, kind of like this, but, I'm not good at doing jokes on my feet, so, I'm just going to stick with the podcast format for now. But I really admire anyone who, does get into stand-up and who is really funny. I think that's good. As far as Bill Burr's special goes, his special wasn't as good as Chappelle's. Chappelle's special is, that's got to be, like, best stand-up of the year. But I will say that Burr did a bit on feminism, like at the beginning of this new special that he just released this week, Paper Tiger, that was pretty damn good, if I say so myself. He made fun of himself more than any thing, and it was pretty good. So, I would highly recommend checking out both those specials. I don't know, my only complaint about Bill Burr, and it's not even Bill Burr, is Bill Burr's wife. Look, I get it. She's entitled to his opinion, and he's entitled to his. But every time she comes on the podcast, which isn't a lot now that they've had a kid, she just always seems like angry about something, and not like funny angry like Bill is, but like legitimately angry. Like, I remember one time, she came on to the podcast and was just complaining how there's nothing but, like, white people on Game of Thrones, and how, like, it's a white person's show, and she just seemed, like, really bitter about it. Like, despite the fact that, like, there are a whole bunch of YouTubers out there, like the Black Nerd, who, also review Game of Thrones, and they watched it, too, when it was on. I don't know. But, like, as far as Bill himself goes and his new special, it's definitely worth checking out. So, anyway, all I can say in regards to the comedy specials out there is I'm just looking forward right now to the day when Louis C.K. comes out of retirement and, we're out of his exile and, produces another special. I'm actually kind of waiting for that one. That's the one that I really want to, that I really want to see, just because I want to see how many, SJW heads explode. Once Louis comes back onto the scene. I mean, I've said for years, I'm a fan of Louis personally. I think, in terms of like who's performing today, he's probably my favorite. And it's not like even really a lot of his jokes, although like the fag joke that he does is pretty great. But what I admire about Louis the most is just like his cinematography and the way he shoots specials and whatnot, and the fact that like a lot of his specials are independently made and independently sold and shot. And when he was doing his TV show on FX, like I remember like listening to interviews with him like on Sears or whatever, and he would say that like, yeah, I edit all of the episodes like on my MacBook Pro for, the Louis show on FX, and that's what we do. And, as someone who's like interested in like screenwriting a little bit myself and like film editing a little bit myself, like a lot of I'm into I haven't done an independent film, but you guys know I'm a film buff, and like I've written some kind of screenplays and short stories of my own. Like all that stuff fascinates me. So I admire, when someone like a Louis is willing to do that. And, the Louis show on FX is brilliant. And, Live at the Beacon Theater, which is one of his specials, is a great special. So, and his Louis' website is down right now. And last I saw, he was planning on coming back. So we'll see if 2020 makes the return of Mr. Louis C.K. I hope it does. I would be shocked if he does anything this year, but, who knows? He could come out with something, in November, December. Maybe. Probably not. But hopefully 2020 is the year of Louis' return, and then we'll really see the, the feminist and the new left's head explode. But, anywho. So yeah, in conclusion with kind of that whole segment, comedy and stand-up comedy is going to save America, folks, from the craziness that we've kind of descended into. And I love it. I think it's great. And I just think we need more of it. So, yeah, big round of applause for our stand-up comedians. Yeah, let's hear it, shall we? Let's hear it for the stand-up comedians again. So, yeah. Yep, we love our comedians. So, anywho. Yeah, I'm playing with a new app where I can play sound effects while I'm recording, so pretty cool. Also does all the equalization and whatnot automatically, supposedly. So that's cool as well. What else do I have on the docket? Oh, yeah. So, I've gotten a couple comments, like, Sam, why don't you do political stuff as much anymore? You haven't been diving into current events as much. And, let me just say, like, I guess, I don't know, like, I haven't lost interest in politics, but, the culture war has always kind of been like my baby, to a certain extent, and like pop culture stuff, and like I don't know, I just have a better time like ad-libbing and whatnot, and like what my favorite comedy specials are, like this, and talking like movies and music and whatnot, and stuff like that. So I'm still gonna like do politics, obviously, but right now I don't know, the primaries seem to bore me, and there are a million political podcasts out there, um, that are very good, mostly like as I recommended before, the Ion 2020 from my friend Ray Eaton, like he covers the political stuff every day, and whatnot. Like Ray is how I used to be when it, like, early on. Like he's just diving into the political stuff. I don't know, man. I've just gotten jaded from like focusing on it, like 24/7. So like I still do pay attention to it. I'll still bring it up, but I don't need to read news headlines every single podcast. Like over the past year, like I've just kind of found that I've found my groove, and sometimes that means I'll talk politics. Sometimes that means I'll talk pop culture. Sometimes that means I'll have like an interview with a guy like Robbie, or like Sean, Alex, and Phil from Verse Media, where we just shoot the shit for 2.5 hours on various topics. So nothing has really changed in terms of like what the podcast is, except for the fact that I decided to move the podcast category on Apple Podcasts from politics to comedy interviews. Why? Because this isn't really like a comedy show per se, but like, neither is Joe Rogan's podcast isn't like a comedy podcast, and he kind of just encompasses everything now, and that's kind of what the comedy category has become on, Apple Podcasts. So I don't know. I just kind of changed the category. Supposedly you're supposed to be able to add like up to 3 categories now for podcasts in the new iTunes settings. So I don't know. That may be, a thing, but just letting you folks know that the days of this podcast being strictly political, 100% of the time are over. I'm just going to do me and, doing whatever I feel hits my fans because it's my podcast. And, a lot of you have been super, super supportive. So, again, I want to thank you a million. And, don't worry, I'll be covering a bunch of stuff once 2020 hits. So, like I'm not retiring from the, from the political game at all. The way I see it, I'm expanding my horizons more or less. But one more thing I want to kind of jump into here kind of at the end of the program. Speaking of outrage culture and whatnot. Taylor Swift fans. Taylor Swift fans have always annoyed me to no end. And I will admit that I might have a bit of a biased reason for that. Because one of my ex-girlfriends from high school was like a crazy obsessed Taylor Swift fan, to the point where like she would write on like Taylor's Facebook fan page in high school, like saying things like, "Oh my God, Taylor, you and I are like sisters. And like I just really like if it had been a guy writing that stuff, like it would have been considered like creepy stalker territory. But because it was like a super chick, fan type of thing, I don't know, like I guess, like every chick was doing that sort of thing with Taylor Swift when I was in high school. And I mean, I don't know. She's decent looking, but her music is, it's, well, it just it never really captured my interest. It's not horrible. I've certainly heard like, like horrible music, but it's just never really hit my taste. On the other hand, I recently did discover the band Tool. Once they released their discography on streaming and on iTunes, and I had always heard about Tool like for years when I was growing up, but had never listened to their music. And like it took me a few weeks to get into them, but now I'm a fan, and I've always been a fan of like rock and like prog rock in particular. The one thing I will say is I've never been like a huge heavy metal fan, and granted, like that's the one thing that like Tool has kind of been like classified under like general categories as metal. But like honestly, they're more of like a prog rock, like metal group. So like I went from like not knowing any of their stuff like a month ago, to now like I'm not going out and buying T-shirt, but like I actually went out and like aside from just streaming, I actually like bought their MP3 albums off of iTunes. Well, Sam, why did you do that when you could have just continued streaming them? I just like when I really like an artist, when I really really like an artist, and I know they could benefit from, like my money. I still like to throw them a couple bucks. So, and granted, like it's $10 or whatever, but it's not that bad when you want to support your like favorite artists. And like it's cheaper than me spending like $200 or whatever it is to go see one of their concerts. So one of their concerts, so if I can support their discography, that's good. But the reason why I bring up Taylor Swift fans is and I tweeted this out on Twitter the other night too. Well, obviously, because where else would I have tweeted it? But anyway, Maynard James Keenan, the singer for Tool, tweeted out like a meme the other night in which like he superimposed his own face on to Thanos, and he was in the meme. It was him snapping his finger and Taylor Swift disappearing, just like the Thanos did with the Infinity Gauntlet. And like in the meme, Taylor Swift is going like, "Oh no, Mr. Keenan, like I'm disappearing. Please don't make me disappear," or something like that. Like it was just meant as like a simple satire joke and whatnot. And yet all of these like super feminist like Taylor Swift fans, like one of these nameless verified check marks on Twitter was like, "Maynard James Keenan, how dare you? You're promoting rape culture. Taylor Swift is a sexual assault survivor." Which, and, how dare you? Maynard James Keenan is, like, is is oppressing Taylor Swift with his misogyny and whatnot. Fortunately, like most people, and they were like, "All right, get out of here." But like, what's ridiculous is like a lot of the Taylor Swift fans were, were like following suit, and it was a fucking meme that Keenan posted. But see, this is the world we live in now, where you just tweet like a meme. In the case of Maynard James Keenan, and now you get like fucking accused of like misogyny or like promoting rape culture, or whatnot, which these days, according to the uber feminists, everything is rape culture. So at that point, like, not only was I already a fan of Tool, but like that was the point where I went and downloaded Tool's albums rather than just streaming them. I went out and spent that money just to ensure for sure that Tool would stay in the charts. Fear Inoculum, folks, really is a great album. But Sam, you're a new fan. How could you say that? Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. As a new fan, like, Fear Inoculum is one of the best rock albums I've heard in quite a long time. And I'm a fan of Rush, and I'm a big time Rush fan. I'm a big time King Crimson fan. I'm a big fan of the Police. You long-time listeners, you guys know what I'm into. I've talked about it before on the podcast a little bit, but like Tool is now part of the misogyny complex, according to these feminists, and we have to stop them. So you know what that means, folks. Time to buy more Tool albums, and if you have the money, which I unfortunately don't, because I'm a broke ass college student, as I like to say. If you're so inclined and if you have the money, go see Tool in concert, because they're just great. So, and Taylor Swift is going to get overtaken by a group that actually has real musical talent. I have to say, like, I'd heard of Danny Carey, but and now I know what the hype is among drummers too. He's fantastic. He is absolutely fantastic. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for this week's episode of the Thursday podcast, and I will be back Saturday night, probably talking some election stuff. But anyway, folks, I want to thank you so very much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. As always, just thank you to everyone who's subscribed and continued to support the show and gave us a positive review on iTunes and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It really helps out. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I will see you guys on Saturday evening, 10 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/DoitfieldReport. Until then, folks, God bless, God save this great nation, God, freedom, legacy, in that order, and I will see you on the next episode of the Whitfield Report. Hey there, folks. If you've made it this far to the end of the podcast, I'd like to thank you very much for listening to the show. You are the ones that make it possible for me to make an income from podcasting, and I greatly appreciate that just by listening to our show. You are helping us gain ad revenue. However, if you would really like to help support the show, I encourage you to please donate to the podcast and become a supporter of the show, you can head over to anchor.fm/Whitfield Report and click the support this podcast button and choose the amount that suits you to support the show. Or you can click the link in the show notes and it will directly take you to that page. If you can support the podcast, I really, really appreciate that. Anything that you can do to help out is greatly appreciated. Even if you can't afford to help financially support the podcast, I encourage you to please go on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Stitcher and please leave this podcast a positive 5-star review. That really helps us out here at the Whitfield Report. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next episode.